Joining me live from Brisbane is Shadow Resources and Northern Australia Minister Susan McDonald. Susan McDonald, thanks for your time. Let's start with these environmental laws. What's the coalition objection to them?
Well, just because the minister says that these are going to be better for the environment does not make that true. What we're trying to caution the government on is not to rush through legislation. They have form in this regard. The best example I can think of was the interventions into the gas market. The legislation, the ink was not even dry when it came into the Parliament. And of course, the minister had to then walk back and make a whole lot of exemptions to make it even vaguely workable. Our fear is that this legislation will do exactly the same. There is no clarity, there is no certainty. And whilst the minister talks to Uluru and protecting that, what he's not talking about is the thousands of mining jobs that have been slowed down and that will be at threat of whether or not they'll reach investment decision under this new legislation.
Well, he says, you know, even though the timings are the same, which I find interesting, that is getting rid of that state-federal duplication. Do you accept if he's doing that, we will see quicker yeses or nos on projects, less maybes?
Well, again, because there's not been a lot of transparency, this government is a master of not providing transparency on legislation. What we understand is that there may be greater assessments at a state level, but still not approvals, which means that there still will remain this duplication, this iterative process that happens through the state and then the federal government approvals. Just remember, Andrew, that it is currently on average 16 years between the discovery of an ore body and first ore being produced. 16 years. So this is a huge body of work to get through. And we've just signed a very important agreement with our greatest ally, the US. It is critical that we be making sure that the critical minerals, the rare earths that have been specifically identified in that agreement, that there is some certainty that they will be able to get an approval process. But at the moment, as we understand it, there is a whole lot of uncertainty. There is no grandfathering for projects that have already been approved. They could receive new conditions. There is no right of appeal for the stop work legislation. There is a whole lot of uncertainty. Industry's flagging it, the coalition's flagging it, and if the government was smart, they would provide the legislation in its entirety, allow it to be properly reviewed so that we can get the best outcome in Australia's national interests.
Well, their argument on critical minerals is if you oppose this, you'll slow those projects up. What do you say to that?
Oh, well, I think that's a ridiculous sort of motherhood statement that it's all going to be okay, just trust us. We have seen so many examples of the government introducing legislation rushed with no transparency, and the minister has to go back and fix it later. We are saying that this legislation is so important. The process was commenced under Susan Lee. We want to see a better process. We're seeing additional penalties for miners, but we're not seeing any additional penalties for activists who are slowing down and using lawfare to delay and stop projects. Indeed, the government continues to fund one of those very organisations. So, no, I'm not seeing the practical examples that would mean that we will have faster approvals under this government at all.
Do you believe the government sees an opportunity to wedge you here?
Well, that would be very foolish because it's not about wedging the coalition. This is about undermining national prosperity. This is seeing Australian jobs go offshore. This is seeing young people who might want to go into the well-paid mining industry not have that opportunity. This is seeing regional areas are being undermined because the great projects, the wealth-building projects of mining and agriculture that exist in regional places are being slowed or even stopped. All of the new jobs that are coming on into our economy aren't in the private sector. They're not in mining and agriculture. They are coming on in government jobs. These aren't jobs that are being paid for by new taxes, new royalties and well-paid projects. This is indeed the government continuing to recycle our taxes without bringing on new ones. I think this is the wrong argument to be having. If the government was serious about Australia's national interests, they would provide greater transparency on this legislation. They would have genuine conversation with the Shadow Minister, and they would seek to have better outcomes, particularly in relation to the trade arrangement that we've just signed with the US.
Well, on that, on critical minerals, what do you make of the deal with the US and what are the challenges for it going forward?
Could I just spend a second just describing the critical minerals framework in Australia is made up of four things. It is that it is an element or a mineral that's important to new technology and to Australia's future needs. It's important to our trade partners and allies. It's something that we have in adequate reserves and that supply chains are threatened. I argue that in the last 3 years, since the Albanese government came in, there's been massive changes to supply chains, to the technology that's been developed in the world, and that's why we have been arguing for the addition of additional materials onto the critical minerals list. I think that's an important start to give access to those minerals to the Critical Minerals Fund, to a higher priority to the government. So I'll just start with that. This is an incredibly important deal because we are seeing supply chains blocked by China. They have stopped the export of processed materials that are so important to new technologies and the modern world that we are enjoying living in. So this is why the critical minerals elements are so important. And I'll just give you an example of different jurisdictions around the world having different priorities. In the EU, met coal and uranium are both on their lists. They're not on Australia's lists, but I would argue that certainly uranium should be on ours, along with potash and phosphate, critical for fertilisers and food production, as well as bauxite, aluminium, nickel, which has recently been added, tin, and zinc. These are all incredibly important parts of our modern technology. Australia should be playing a better part in those. It is a competition. The US has signed arrangements with the Ukraine. All of these companies will be looking at how they can be first to market, making sure that they are satisfying the world's demands, and Australia's not doing that.
Aren't you able to say that was a successful meeting for Anthony Albanese? The agreement's a good thing? That's not your view?
Oh, no, I completely welcome the agreement. This is something that is long overdue. It took nearly a year for the Prime Minister to get a meeting with the President, but this is a great agreement. But having just set the recipe for making this great relationship and this great trade deal, it's important that Australia is able to deliver on the necessary ingredients. And one of the key ones is that we have approval timeframes. That means it's not 16 years on average from identifying reserves and getting them into production. That's a critical part of that.
Do you have any concerns about AUKUS still being under review, despite the assurances of the President of its future and that comment in that cabinet room in the White House that there are improvements the Americans are seeking?
Oh, well, I will leave that to others who are more across this to comment on. But this is one of our greatest, longest-term relationships. And I think it's important that Australia treats that respectfully and continues to engage, because the success of our relationship with the US is Australia's future success as well.
All right, let's talk about Kevin Rudd. Now, let's try and get a handle on what the coalition position is on whether Kevin Rudd should stay as ambassador. What is the coalition position on that?
Well, I think it is a matter of respect. If this is the front face of our relationship with the trading partner, surely it should be somebody who is respected by the other team and who sees value in dealing with us. I just draw the comparison with China. Can you imagine that if the Australian ambassador to China was not acceptable to that government, in fact had made some pretty strong and inflammatory comments about the President, whether or not our Australian Prime Minister would have received such warm and cordial meetings with him? I think this is a matter of respect. I think the US is flagging their concerns by the President's comments about he will be appointing a US ambassador when he finds somebody who is acceptable to Australia as well as him. I think he is trying to diplomatically flag how impossible this situation is. But this is a decision for the Prime Minister. This is a decision for him to make about whether or not he thinks that he has selected the best person, given that there has been a change of president since the appointment of Ambassador Rudd. And I think he should be seriously examining this, because the President has been very direct in his comments, and I think very direct in his understanding that he will be appointing somebody to Australia from the US who is acceptable to us. That's common courtesy.
Well, yeah, and direct twice, I guess. Do you think Donald Trump knew who Kevin Rudd was when he made those comments in the meeting?
Well, I can't know what the President knew or didn't know, but I think it was the ultimate burn. Imagine sitting across from a table and saying you're not sure who this person is and is he still employed. So I think we can all draw our own conclusions, but it was, I think, possibly the biggest diplomatic slap that I can think of.
Can I turn now to net zero policy? When's the coalition likely to finalise its policy? And it looks like a change is on the way when you look at these comments by Melissa McIntosh, your shadow communications spokeswoman. She asked her community whether they supported net zero by 2050. She lives in an area where there's a lot of heat, frankly, a lot of hot weather. She said 65% of her community didn't. Now, she's an ally of Susan Lee. Is this another sign you're going to walk away from net zero by 2050?
Well, I think that Melissa McIntosh, along with Anne Webster and a whole lot of representatives from around Australia, have been working hard to not just qualitatively but quantitatively understand exactly what it is that their communities want their representative to be taking action on. And I think that we are in this now ridiculous situation, that we are at 28% emissions reductions. That hasn't moved in the last 3 years. The target of 43% reduction by 2030, which there is no way we can achieve. And yet now we're doubling down with the new target between 60 and 70% by 2035. I mean, I don't think anybody in their right minds thinks that the government is achieving these targets, but the instruments they're putting in place are so incredibly damaging to Australia's competitiveness and prosperity right here. It's driving up the cost of living, driving up people's electricity bills, driving up the costs of doing business, which means that these people's jobs are now threatened. This should be of enormous concern to the government. It certainly is to the coalition, which is why we are trying to draw attention to the government's failures in setting policies that are fantastical, nonsensical, and worse, hurting Australians.
Well,
that is our priorities. How do we best protect Australians and their jobs?
Could it be the coalition comes up with a policy like net zero by 2060?
That's a whole range of discussions that are happening. I won't drag them out now, but I can tell you that we are focused on protecting Australians, both in their homes, in their jobs, and the future prosperity of their children and grandchildren. That should be the work of government. Instead, we're seeing private sector jobs disappearing. We're seeing a government unable to manage its agenda, and a perfect example is this environmental legislation that's coming in. They're not being transparent. They don't seem to understand what really needs to happen for business to be successful and subsequently for Australian jobs to be protected. And so for all of those reasons, we are incredibly focused on representing and protecting our communities wherever they might be across Australia.
And what's the latest on Barnaby Joyce? Will he be in the Coalition Party room, the Nats Party room this week? Do you think he might eventually go to One Nation? What's he saying?
Well, I certainly hope he will be. We have an important job to do. It is a distraction to be talking about anything else but how we protect Australians wherever they might live. Barnaby's role in protecting the people of New England is stronger when he is part of the National Party room, when he is part of the coalition. So for those reasons, I hope that he does decide to stay because we are on the brink of having progressing policy announcements on the very things that are important to him, are important to his community, So I think it would be premature for him to go now. And I certainly hope that he is part of the room because we are stronger together.
What's expected tomorrow? Is he signalled he might not be part of the room, is that right?
Well, that's what we'll wait and see, won't we?
Just finally, what do you make of the latest allegations concerning the CFMEU that have emerged over the past couple of days after the government put them into administration and said the whole show was being cleaned up?
I think that this is a union that has terrorised workers, and not just workers but their families, their children at school. They have skyrocketed costs so that we are struggling to deliver really important projects in a timely manner. They've damaged the housing market with the cost of construction. This is a union that is not working in the best interest of either their members or the Australian community. And I think the government has been trying to tippy-toe around that. I'm really hopeful that they will do the job that they're supposed to do and protect Australians. So in Queensland, the inquiry will see more details of what's been happening right here in this state. But, you know, I think the Albanese government is failing in its primary role to protect Australians, whether it be in their homes, whether it be in holding a great job and future Australian prosperity. This government is failing Australians. It is a coalition's job to hold them to account, and that is absolutely what we are doing and will continue to do.
Susan McDonald, thanks for your time.
Really appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.